There was a time when the future felt predictable. Life followed structured paths that seemed stable and permanent.
You were told that if you studied hard, worked diligently, and saved money consistently, security would eventually arrive. Retirement was presented as the ultimate destination. A moment when effort would finally end and life could truly begin. This belief shaped entire generations. It created a powerful agreement between individuals and institutions. You trusted that systems would preserve value, that time itself could be stored and redeemed later. Wealth became something to accumulate patiently. Freedom became something to delay. But beneath this stability, the world was already beginning to accelerate. Technology started moving faster than institutions, faster than careers, faster than retirement timelines. For the first time, the path that once felt guaranteed began to feel uncertain. The world was no longer organized around a single center. Structures that once felt permanent began to fragment. Opportunities stopped following predictable timelines. They began appearing in unexpected places. Value started flowing through networks rather than institutions. Connections slowly became a new form of currency. To move forward, you could no longer rely on paths designed decades ago. The environment itself became dynamic. Stability was replaced by continuous motion. Wealth that once felt secure began to lose its fixed meaning. Destinations you were taught to trust started disappearing upon arrival. Time itself stopped behaving predictably. Long-term planning became increasingly fragile. The future you were saving for was no longer clearly defined. In a decentralized age, certainty no longer leads. Awareness does. You are no longer defined by a single role or institution. Survival begins to depend on flexibility. The identity shaped by stable systems starts to dissolve. Opportunities become temporary windows. Movement replaces waiting. In a decentralized world, progress depends on connection rather than hierarchy. Systems designed for predictability struggle to survive accelerating change. Wealth can no longer be reduced to passive accumulation. Adaptation itself becomes a strategic advantage. Mobility becomes a hidden asset. There is no longer one correct timeline for success. The future branches continuously. The more the world decentralizes, the more individual awareness matters. Security begins to shift inward, from external guarantees to internal adaptability. Instead of postponing freedom, life begins to reorganize into phases of engagement and rest. Work and recovery start to alternate more frequently. Mini retirements replace one distant finish line. Identity becomes modular. You experiment, build, pause, and move again. A generation raised in stability learns to operate in constant transition. The concept of one final retirement starts to lose psychological relevance. Many limitations existed only because they were collectively believed. Dependence on fixed structures gradually gives way to strategic autonomy.
When systems become fragile, mobility becomes protection.
Security is no longer a place you reach. It becomes a capability you cultivate. In a decentralized reality, survival favors those who can sense timing. Freedom was never designed to arrive after decades of delay. It begins to emerge when perception changes. Constraints often survive because they are unconsciously accepted. In uncertain environments, the ability to wait intelligently becomes powerful.
Direction is no longer forced, it is sensed. Retirement stops being withdrawal. It becomes a different rhythm of participation.
When you stop exchanging every hour for security, time gradually returns to you.
Legacy shifts from possession to movement.
Speed loses meaning when awareness defines direction.
Authority begins to move inward. External validation becomes less decisive.
True sovereignty is not control, it is alignment with change. Every generation creates systems they believe will secure the future. We inherit not only resources, but assumptions about how life should unfold. The next generation redesigns survival at a speed previous structures cannot match. To remain relevant, adaptation must outpace comfort. The future begins where certainty ends. Wealth becomes less about holding ground and more about navigating motion. Ownership becomes temporary. Contribution becomes lasting. In networked realities, connection itself becomes currency. Value expands when you participate in its creation. Ownership becomes temporary. Contribution becomes lasting. In networked realities, connection itself becomes currency.
Security no longer means stillness. It means intelligent movement. Freedom begins to change meaning. It is no longer postponed to a distant phase of life. When awareness grows, many invisible constraints lose their power.
In fluid environments, timing becomes more valuable than speed.
The decentralized mind does not force outcomes. It senses opportunities. Retirement evolves from withdrawal into intentional engagement. When you stop trading every hour for certainty, time slowly returns to you. Legacy becomes movement rather than possession. Experience replaces accumulation. In accelerating worlds, speed alone no longer guarantees relevance.
Authority gradually shifts inward. Self-awareness becomes strategic power.
True sovereignty is harmony with change. The question is no longer how much you can accumulate before stopping.
It becomes how intelligently you can design your time while living.
Wealth that cannot adapt eventually imprisons its owner. In decentralized realities, awareness begins to shape destiny. Retirement stops being the end of striving. It becomes the freedom to choose your striving. When fear stops driving movement, stillness becomes possible.
You begin to see how deeply invisible stories shaped your decisions.
The most valuable asset was always your capacity to adapt.
When consciousness evolves, strategy evolves with it. Freedom is not complexity, it is clarity. Every era believes its strategies will secure the future. But time quietly rewrites the rules of survival. The future belongs to those who can move before certainty appears. In decentralized worlds, freedom is practiced, not granted.
The journey never truly ends.
It simply changes form. And each generation
rebuild systems they believe will last. until change arrives.
There was a time when the future felt predictable.